Hey, good afternoon. This is Jay Frost speaking to you, and I'm very happy to welcome you back to another in this series of flash classes brought to you by who else? Donor Search. And of course, you can find out more about Donor Search on the web anytime at donorsearch.net. You won't be hearing about the company today, although we're really delighted they continue to provide a platform for bringing you the best and top voices in the field of fundraising and philanthropy, and doing that once again today. But again, if you want to learn more about the company, go right online and you can find anything you want to know right there. Of course, if you want to get access to this content after the fact, you'll be happy to know that you'll be able to get both the slides and a recording of this session after the session today. And so first of all, the slides will go directly to you by going to your email. That'll go right into your box, sent to you directly by Donor Search. And as far as the recording is concerned, all you need to do is go to the resources tab at donorsearch.net, go down to the flash class library. As you can see, it's the third item on the list, like on your screen. And then you'll pull up a page that looks just like this one, recorded videos. There, you'll see nearly 150 of these sessions dating back to mid-2016 when this series started. And it contains lots and lots of content from a tremendous number of presenters, I think well over 100. And you can sort them all by title, by presenter. You can look them up by subject, by keyword. It's a terrific place to look for content that's going to be very valuable to you. But of course, this session will be there in just the next couple of days. So if you're with colleagues and you want to share this again with other people who can't be with you, do look for it right there. Of course, your microphones are silenced. We don't want any ambient noise in the background to interfere with your enjoyment. So to keep out those ambulances and dogs from barking, we will be silencing once again your mics, but we do want you to participate. So the best way to do that is simply by going to your GoToWebinar control panel and taking a look where the bouncing arrow is. You can see the questions tab. Please go ahead and note any questions at any point along the path, and those will be provided to our presenter at several intervals during his presentation, as well as at the conclusion. He may even have a prompt for you at the very beginning to get a sense about who's in the audience today. So once again, do look for that so you can actively participate in the conversation as it goes along. Of course, the session today is all about the capital campaign, and we have the right person to talk about it, sharing with you the 6 key ingredients he knows work so successfully in a capital campaign context, and that is Peter Heller, principal of the Heller Fundraising Group. After a 15-year career working at 5 universities on a handful of huge capital campaigns, that's millions and millions and billions of dollars, Peter left his day job at Columbia University in New York City. That was 14 years ago, and that was when he founded Heller Fundraising Group, which you can find on the web. You'll have contact information for that at the conclusion of the presentation today. Located in New York, his company, which now has 4 staff and a team of additional consultants, provides consulting and training services to nonprofits, focusing on, of course, capital campaigns, feasibility studies, and building major gift programs. Peter has specially trained scores of nonprofit professionals in capital campaign and major gift fundraising, and he's recently conducted training programs for Amnesty International, New Israel, AFP, Foundation Center, Bridgespan, CFO Network, and many others. He's even somebody I've turned to on more than one occasion to talk to and provided excellent advice, as I know he will to you today. So with that, it's a pleasure to welcome Peter Heller to the Flash Class stage. Thanks for being here, Peter.
Thank you, Jay. So good to be here, and it's good to be here with everybody who's on the computer or phone line with us. And Jay, would you like to launch us off with a quick poll right now, or how would you like to do that?
Well, we can't launch a poll right now, but if you'd like to ask a question, we can monitor the question.
Right. So okay, yeah. So I thought we would just ask people who wanted to just type in what their role is in the nonprofit that they're working with. or if they're on a board, so we get a sense of who's here. That'll just be interesting to know. And then I'm just going to dive right in and get going. This, as Jay said, there's going to be a few periods, actually 3 periods for questions. So please type in all your questions, and we'll do our best to answer as many as possible. And if they can't be answered on the webinar, I'll see if I can answer them afterwards.
And Peter, you do have a lot of responses already. You have people who are serving on the board, several people serving as director of development officers, directors of major gifts, directors of the annual fund, the chair of an organization, directors of advancement, prospect research professionals, operations heads. It's quite a long list.
That's fabulous. I think they all called into the right webinar, not to something else. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. So today's webinar is Your Capital Campaign, Are You Ready? I'm just going to, for just a minute, introduce my company so that you have some sort of grounding for what we're going to be doing today. And let's see. So our tagline is Your Aspirations Funded. The reason we use that is that we're really interested in helping you dream big on what your organization is going to do and find out how to express that. And then we feel we have all the systems that you need to get the funding, but that it's not starting with the funding, it's really starting with your aspirations. And this is just a smattering of some of the nonprofits we worked with over the years. This is our team at present. As Jay said, we've got 4 employees and the rest are collaborating consultants. A few of us are spread in different parts of the country, but most of us are here in New York City. I love showing pictures of myself, so let's see, this is probably only the 3rd time today you've seen it. Where did I work before I started this company? I spent 10 years at Columbia University on their fundraising staff, and then worked at 4 other, 3 universities and 1 college. What do? We do 4 things. Feasibility and planning studies, which lead up to capital campaigns, major gift programs, which we find happen a lot when people don't currently need a campaign but want to leverage the most capable, philanthropically capable people in their networks. And then we do training and coaching like we're doing today. So we're going to talk for a few minutes about some basic concepts of capital campaigns. Then we're going to get into what I call the 6 elements of successful capital campaign fundraising. This slide is probably my favorite slide because it just makes everything so obvious. To run a successful campaign, you have to gather a big pile of money and put it into your bank account. Now, I don't think there's anybody on this webinar who would think that that's not what you have to do, but part of the paradox is that just like in our tagline, that if you focus on the money, you're not really going to get where you need to go as quickly as possible. You cannot make it transactional. And we're going to see that as the webinar proceeds. I also like this slide a lot, not only because it's mostly blank, and we'll have some more fun slides coming up in a few minutes that will hopefully keep your attention, but also because I thought a lot about the word campaign. And from what I can tell, there's really only limited places that it's used in our vocabulary. A capital campaign is certainly one of them. A political campaign, certainly we saw a lot of those up through yesterday. A military campaign, and perhaps also a marketing campaign. The thing for me that unites all of those is that you need a really strong, rational plan before you start. And the other thing is that once you have that plan and you've got your campaign rolling, you really need to be flexible, because none of those types of campaigns, including a capital campaign for a nonprofit to raise millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, none of those ever goes exactly how you think it might. So you need to have the flexibility to adjust as you're going along. And I thought I'd give you one slide that demonstrates here how how, just basically my definition of a capital campaign. So please just take a moment and read it, and we will then move on. We call this the meditative period of the webinar. So thank you for doing that. And you'll notice that, and we'll get to this when we talk about a case for support, you're talking about galvanizing attention on the future of your community, not the future of your organization, because your organization is really just a channel or a vehicle to support your community. If the campaign is all about your organization, you'll raise some money, but you won't raise as much as you need. And that's why it's never really about the building or specifically the program. It's what can happen as a result of those things. Excuse me, whoops, 1 second here, trying to get to the next slide. Okay, so I also, to start us off, I came up with some bad reasons for a campaign. An organizational anniversary. I get a lot of calls from organizations. We have our 25th anniversary coming up. We want to do a capital campaign. Fabulous, but it needs to be linked with something more compelling than a birthday. We like the idea of owning a building. Lots of people like owning buildings, but there has to be, again, a compelling reason that you need to own that building over renting it or renting some sort of space. A board member suggests it. Board members have lots of amazing ideas and have a lot to offer to nonprofits, but just because somebody has a large voice and an important voice in the room and they want to do a campaign, again, to me, doesn't cut it. Nothing to do this weekend, that's probably my worst reason. So here's what we're going to spend the most of our time today on, which are these 6 elements of a successful campaign. And we're going to start with right in with the dollar goal. And I'm going to talk through some of this stuff, and then I'm going to show you some examples. And throughout, I have a few tables and charts and some pictures, and try to make it as interesting as possible for everybody. So the dollar goal is the first thing you want to think about. And the reason that is that it really drives what it is you're going to do. It forces you to figure out the things and the cost of those things that are going to be inside of your campaign. Most of the time when we start with nonprofit organizations on discussing campaigns, believe it or not, they haven't written down a budget for their campaign, which is really the first thing that you need to do. And if you haven't done it, it's fine, but you need to get going. So here are some of the things, depending on the type of campaign you want to run. And again, these first 3 bullets really define the major reasons that people conduct a capital campaign versus just kind of going out and raising money for whatever they need. Okay, if you have a building project, you almost always need some sort of capital campaign. That could be a new building or a renovation of a site. Program funding, something beyond your current year in, year out funding. And then endowment, which can be added to other campaigns, or right now, for instance, we're working with an organization that's going to be doing only an endowment campaign. And then finally, it's really important to not forget about the costs that are involved in a capital campaign, whether it's events, mailings, designing and printing of materials, and consulting services, such like we provide, or legal services. So I wanted to now show you 2 campaign budgets. My rule for everything involving a campaign, and it starts with the budget, is simple, simple, simple. Now, this is a very simple campaign with 3 line items. We did this campaign, I think it ended about 3 or 4 years ago. So it had 3, it had current initiatives, new goals. So the current initiatives were the current programs, new goals, which were their new programs, and then endowment and plan gifts. Very simple, $6.5 million. They ended up raising 6.6. Now here's a building project only campaign for $16 million. It's actually, we just today learned that they crossed the $14 million mark. And this is for a synagogue. and they divided the budget by the types of spaces that they were going to either expand or renovate. And then what we did was we put all of the what are called soft costs, meaning the furniture and the painting, and then also the costs of running the campaign into each of the line items. So we just divided them up. So we came up with the $16 million in that way. It looks simple. It took a lot of time to get to this number. Now I want to show you a very complex budget. I don't expect you to be able to actually see anything on here, although if you look really closely, you can. This is a budget that a real estate management firm was helping this client with a $50 to $60 million campaign. And this is really important for figuring out everything you need to spend money on. It's not good for explaining a campaign to your leadership or even yourselves. So if you look at this, and again, I'm not going to go over these numbers in details, but this is a blow up of just 3 of those areas. These are construction costs, owners related costs, and soft costs, and they're about altogether about $50 million. So what did we do? For the campaign case, which we'll get to in a minute, and for explaining the campaign to the leadership in simple sort of charitable dollar terms, we did this. And in fact, I want you to ignore everything except for the first 2 line items. The rest is where the money is going to come from. We broke that very complex thing down into simply 2 things. New building, enhanced programming, $60 million, boom. It can be that simple. Now, you probably want to add a few layers, but that's just trying to demonstrate the fact you can go from complex to simple, and the simpler the better for campaigns. Finally, and I'm not going to spend a long time on this, I hope a lot of you are familiar with this tool. It's a gift table. We'll get back to it a few steps down the road again. But once you know what your dollar goal is, and in this particular example case, it's a $5 million campaign, you want to put that dollar goal into a gift table to at least give yourself an initial sense of how that money is going to break out. Okay, it's not going to be an equal amount of money times whatever to get to the goal. There's going to be leadership gifts, major gifts, and what we tend to call community gifts. And you can do a number of different metrics, but this is a nice breakdown. You'll see that the 70% of the money is coming from leadership gifts. That's only 8 gifts. That's a very powerful thing to think about. Okay, so just again, we're going to do one more of these elements, which is the case for support. Then we'll take a quick break in case there's any questions, and then go on to the next element. So your case for support, what is that? I'm going to show you some examples in a few minutes, but really this is where that we as consultants get really into that concept that I shared at the beginning of our tagline of your aspirations funded. A good case for support is a powerful story about how your organization is going to be even stronger in the future and how this campaign is needed for you to get stronger in the future. So what we work with our clients a lot of the time is we work on unpacking and helping them figure out that vision for the future, because it's not obvious to everybody, because people are often they have their heads down inside their organizations focusing on their work, and it's really needs to be sussed out. So the way it works is you figure out that vision, and then there's usually a problem that's getting in the way of that vision, and you also have solutions for that problem. So the problem could be, we have a vision where all the kids in this neighborhood are well-fed and have a great after-school program. Problem is, that's not happening. They're on the streets, whatever like that. Boom, your nonprofit solution is expanding their reach and their after-school program because they're going to build a new after-school facility. And then after that, you talk a little bit about the background of your nonprofit. You put that budget that we just went over, the campaign dollar goal, in there, And then a lot of people like to have a call to action. Join us in our campaign. That's completely fine. Myself, I prefer to do that in face-to-face meetings or in a cover letter if this is going to be mailed out. This is the essential map, in my view. There's a lot of ways to do cases, but in my view, this is the essential map for a case. There's a few other things that I'd like to go over. Some of you may remember a book that came out, I don't know, this 1970s or something. It was called What Shall We Name the Baby? The name of your campaign matters. You'll see in some of the examples I'm going to show you in a moment. I tend to like short names, 1 word, 2 words, a short phrase, something that really captures the imagination. Again, another element that's really important and often overlooked is who is the hero of your case. Just like the campaign is not about your organization, the case, the whatever you write, and it could be 3 pages, it could be 7 pages, or it could be 20 pages. Whatever you write, the case needs to be about your community and the people served and the outcome. That's the hero of your story. It's not your nonprofit or the building that you're going to build or your programs or your endowment. So with that said, I would like to scan through just a few different, I think I have 3 examples of cases that we worked on, just the cover, and then a few of the inside pages, and then one example that actually is terrible that I wanted to share with you. So this is, I love this one, Almost Home. Very simple. It's a art center, Irish art center in Manhattan in New York City. Almost Home, evokes both that they've almost raised the money and completed the project to have this home, and that it's not Ireland, but it's almost Ireland. So there's the cover, and you'll see in all of these, the first couple pages have nothing to do with the campaign and the dollars. This is all about the vision and what's compelling. Here's another one. This is actually the synagogue that we had the budget for earlier. This is a home for the future of Judaism. There's a blue picture of that's their facility behind that. You then open up the first page, you see another blue picture. It's the rabbi and her husband. There's a quote. There's another quote on the next page. There's a photograph of the fabric that covers their ark in their sanctuary. And then there's something about the future of Judaism. You don't get to the campaign till page 6 or 7. Here's one more. This is a children's center. A young girl looking out a window. It actually opens up. That's cut out, so you actually see the same window, the same site on the next page. That's the view you'll get from their new site, Our Children, Our Future. And you see that same view on the right, and then there's some pictures of children, and it's Our Vision. And then more about the children, and then you've got the problem, and you're not like, again, page 6 or 7 before you get to the actual campaign. Finally, I want to share this. This is my favorite example of a terrible case statement. Luckily, my firm had nothing to do with it. If we were in a in-person, face-to-face class, I'd ask everybody questions about, how does this strike you? So let me just go through it quickly for you, though. So here we have I don't know, it's this like gray-blue cover. This is a school for children. There's not a single child in the picture, and the picture is so dull and boring. And the campaign name, the Centennial Campaign. How exciting is that? Then we get to a table of contents. I'm being told there's 16 pages. There's nothing to compel me to even read the first page. I don't need a table of contents in my case statement. And then the thing I like best is here you've got a picture of children down on the lower right, and their backs are to you. So don't do that. Then finally, I just love this. I'll read you the first few sentences of the introduction. There are moments in an institution's history that define its very existence. These moments, when challenges are turned into opportunities, when progress becomes greatness, and when dreams are transformed into reality. For blank school, that moment is now. That's the most insipid, boring thing I've ever heard in my life. It happens to have been written by like a big consulting firm that kind of pulled something out of a can and put the school's name into it. So run away from this type of thing, please. So before we get to prospects, Jay, why don't we stop for a few questions?
Sure, but I have to stop laughing first. That was very funny. We have one question from, let me see, from Carol, who asks about the budgets. Should budget breakouts be designed with balance in mind? The simple one you showed ranged from $2 to $4 million for each part of a $16 million budget.
I think I understand that question. And Carol, feel free to email me if there's more I haven't explained, but I think it's okay to have something that's much larger than the other items if that's the reality of what needs to be funded in your campaign. We're trying to make the budget tell us it's part of the story, and it's telling a story of the truth, not of something that you're making up. And Jay, why don't we take one more question at this point?
Sure. And this is from Beth, who says, can you explain more about including endowment in your budget and goal?
Sure. I have found, like I said, there's one campaign we're working on that's exclusively endowment, and there are good reasons for that in this particular organization. I have found that when you include it as what I'd say like an add-on item with other things like a building, it ends up being not as compelling to the people in your community. Now, that's not 100% true, and there are some people who want to only fund endowment. So there's a number of ways to do it. I'm not going to get into that right now, but I would say you want to make sure that it's compelling to your community before you go ahead and do it. And one way to do that is by conducting a feasibility or planning study, and we're going to touch on that at the very end. I put the feasibility study last, even though it's kind of really the first thing, because I wanted everybody to have a feel for what all these elements were so they could understand more about a feasibility study. So thank you, Beth.
And Peter,
go ahead,
could you
Jay.
take one more question? There's
Sure.
one from Martha who says, where would you put the contingency and or consultant costs in the budget?
Great question. So contingency and consultants are there. So contingency is usually part of a building project. The architects will put numbers in for contingency. So that would be part of the building costs. And then the consultant fees are really that what I was talking about, putting the campaign costs in. So you put those into the budget. You can have both of those as separate line items, or you can just divide them by, if you have three items in your campaign, divide them into those three. You can do it a number of different ways. So thank you, Jay. I'm going to go on now to the next element, which is prospects. And then we'll take some more questions in a few minutes. Obviously, there's no campaign if you don't have prospects. One of the things you need to figure out is, do I have enough prospects? And if I have enough prospects, how do I evaluate whether they're capable of giving the money I want them to give? And if I don't have enough prospects, where do I, is there a prospect store? I don't know. Prospects are us. Where do I go and get those prospects? So we're going to look in a moment at the do I have enough question. How I evaluate them, donor search happens to be great for that. We use donor search with all of our clients. We do a variety of different screenings. And as everybody will tell you, even the people at donor search, it's usually not enough on its own. So we do both rating sessions with our clients, and we also get what we call homegrown information, which is their stories about the people that they know in their donor base, because that's really important to add to what you get through wealth screening from donor search or others. So, and where I get more information, we'll go into that in a minute. So I had promised that we'd look at the gift table again, and here it is. This time, it's the same exact table we looked at in the campaign dollar goal. The thing I wanted to focus on here is the column that says prospects needed. Now, once you put your dollar goal into a gift table, you're going to do a metric of, based on how many gifts, how many more times prospects do I need than gifts? Because not everybody you ask is going to say yes, and they're not all going to say yes at the level that you were hoping they were going to give. So I generally, and it depends on the organization and how well connected they are to their prospects, but I generally use a 3-time multiple for leadership and major gifts and a 2-time multiple for community gifts. So that means for $1 million gifts, you need 1 gift, but you need 3 prospects. And if you look at the bottom, for this campaign, we need 184 prospects at the $5,000 plus level. You still need a whole bunch more to get the less than 5,000, but I don't really worry about that in terms of setting up the success of the campaign. If I can raise $4.8 million, we'll figure out how to raise the final 200,000. So this table very quickly tells you, if you look at your donor base and you've done some analysis of their capacity, do I have enough prospects to do this campaign at the level I want to do it? If the answer is yes, fabulous. Keep going. If the answer is no, one of the first things you're going to have to do is don't take your towel and throw it in. Don't do that. Figure out how you can expand your prospect pool. And that's where the natural networks come in. Okay, here are a number of different ways that you can figure out how to build your network. I'm not going to say much about these because they're all here and they're kind of obvious, but just as a for instance, you see down the list it says business associates. So your top donors, your board members, your advisory board members, and other people can all have business associates who could be both quite well off and potentially interested in your cause. So this is a place where you have to use creative thinking and engage your natural network to build your donor base. Again, this is one of the tools that we use with every single client. If you were to go to my website, which is the hellerfundraisinggroup.com, hellerfundraisinggroup.com, on the upper right-hand corner is a little button that says free tools, and it's simply a spreadsheet with 4 tabs and some instructions. This is one of the tabs. We find this a useful tool to list your potential campaign donors when you're ready to start activating your campaign, because it's a time-sensitive tool. You use the next step date on the left and the next step to move each prospect forward in a timely way. And I love this tool. There's a lot I could say about it. I actually give another webinar where we talk about this in great detail. So for now, I'm going to move forward and we're going to talk about the campaign committee, which is the 4th tool for a successful campaign. So campaign committee. Campaign committee can either be a group of people that starts right away when you start your project as a campaign steering committee, or a lot of times you might want to start with something we call the campaign planning committee, because when you actually get to the campaign fundraising, there may be some additional people you want to add to that group. And it's something that we usually figure out with our clients when we're talking to them about the structure of the campaign. You want to have board members, donors, and maybe some other community members on it. It's really great if you don't just stick to board members, because you're creating a larger net of people who can be involved in your campaign. I think that in terms of starting it, you want to start a planning committee ASAP when you're thinking about a campaign. And then managing it is something that you do. Ideally, you've got somebody on staff, whether it's an executive director who's working in a small shop, or a development director, or even somebody in the development office who can manage the committee. And then I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because you'll see it when you get the slides, but there's a few things. We've got the structure here, the purpose, which is to oversee the campaign and engage in fundraising. Tasks, it's not a whole universe of things, but there are a number of things that are important for people to do. And then the meetings also have to be figured out in a way that really matches your community's needs. Like, are people dispersed around the country or the world? Then you're not going to have frequent face-to-face meetings. If face-to-face is really important from time to time, you can also get a lot done on conference calls. But if you have a committee, the worst sin is to put a committee together and then not use it, because they're sitting around going, boy, this organization is wasting my time. The other concept about a committee that I really want to impress upon you, and this is just my way of doing things, we happen to find it super effective, but when we have that committee, whether it's a planning committee or a steering committee, we get a core group of members who are really willing to roll up their sleeves and think about the campaign and review documents and plans and help the staff and the consultants who are working on this. And that group is in touch and thinking about and having calls and or meetings much more frequently than the overall committee is. You can't get as much done with 10 to 15 people on a call or in a meeting as you can with 3 to 5 people. So that's an idea I would highly recommend. And that's it for those. So Jay, why don't we take a few more questions now, if there are some?
Yeah, actually, I just see one right now, and that is from Michael, who asked, those high-end prospects have to be super solid, not just capacity, right? I know this was back to, I guess, that last section. And I think it was when you were talking about the numbers, perhaps, of people in the GIT pyramid.
That's a great question from Michael. So there's a sort of a pivot point where I think you have to decide whether you're exploring this campaign or you've actually decided you're going to do it, and you're making sometimes financial and other commitments based on the campaign. So early in that process, before before all your feet are in the water, you can have ideas about these prospects. But that's one of the reasons we do a feasibility study, is that that tool and other things allow you to test the reality of whether these people are going to be committing. But at the far end of the spectrum, they need to be super solid. But if you need 3 prospects and 1 gift, that metric is done thinking that one of those has to be more solid than the other 2. And it's a relationship process to figure out how to talk to them and engage them in the campaign. So Jay, I'm going to move on.
Peter, we do have one more if you'd like to take it now or later.
All right, I want it. Let's do it.
Okay, it's from Nancy, who says, could you talk about the role of the chair versus the honorary chair?
Also, great questions today. So often for me, an honorary chair is somebody who's very renowned in the community, and their name associated with your campaign is going to make a difference for a lot of people. And they, I would hope that most of the time they would make a leadership gift. Sometimes they could be somebody who is influential in the community and is not a donor at that level, but it's important to have them involved. Other times it could be somebody who's going to make a gift, and for your actual co-chairs, you need people who are pretty much going to roll up their sleeves in one way or another. There's a number of different ways. Like, not every co-chair needs to be have like every box checked, made their biggest gift, soliciting others, coming to every single meeting, opening doors. If they get maybe 2 of those, it's great. So if there's somebody who kind of doesn't fit any of those criteria, but it's important to have them involved, that's a place for an honorary chair. So that's where I stand with that, Jay, and I'm going to kind of step back into talking about element number 5, which is systems and staffing. This is another really, really important part of a capital campaign. And the reason for it is The four first elements are the structure of your campaign in terms of what you're going to do, how much you're going to raise, are going to be involved in helping you. However, we can make the most amazing campaign plan, but if you don't have systems, and particularly if you don't have the staffing you need, you're just going to be stuck in the water. You're not going to go anywhere. So it's really important to look at this stuff. So let's take a look for a few minutes now. My computer's not moving. There we go. Systems. Okay, what's needed? Here are some of the things that I think are crucial. I'm not going to read each one out loud, but we'll have another 30 seconds of meditative time so everybody can take a look at this. There are a variety of platforms out there. Some are software systems that are either in a fundraising database or standalone that people use to help manage their campaign. We tend to use Google Docs and Google Sheets a lot because we find that by the time people get stuff exported from their database and then imported again and stuff, they're way behind the curve. So we put things like that top prospect report I showed you in a Google Doc and other metrics so that we can all run the campaign together and know what we're talking about, what's going to happen when. There's a lot of different elements here that we could talk about, but really being organized and knowing how you're going to tackle the systems for communicating with, keeping track of and communicating with others in your organization about your campaign is really, really important. And we're going to look at just one thing, which is a metric system. And this is something that I put together a number of years ago when a client wanted to know, how much are we going to, how much activity do we need to have for reaching our goal? And obvious and important question. I'm glad they asked me because I hadn't put anything like this together before that. And this is one of those tabs on that free tool thing I mentioned before. So just really basically, if we look at year 2, you'll see that there are 3 different levels of activity that I've proposed. And I've just kind of created sort of random names for them, but it goes from modest, where you'd have 4 meetings per month, to a dedicated staff person at 13 meetings per month. And we highlighted the 13. It's a lot of meetings per month for most organizations, but let's actually look at the energetic one just to give you a sense of how this works. So if you look at year 2, energetic, your campaign is up and running, and you're meeting with 8 potential donors every month. And those might not be 8 distinct individuals, because if you're doing your job well, you might meet with the same person or family 2 or 3 times. So at the end of the year, you've had 96 meetings, and we want to be really conservative about how many of those you've actually asked for money. So we're going to say you've asked half of them, which is 48, and conservative again, and say that only half of those are going to say yes to your request. So you can see that if, depending on the dollar goal you're asking people in your prospect pool, you're going to have a certain rate of success. So if you have 24 gifts and you ask everybody for $1,000 versus 24 gifts and you've asked everybody for 100,000, depending on their capacity, you can see how you're going to have a very different level of success there, which is why it's really important to identify the people who have the most goals. So this is just one of the systems we use once a campaign is up and running to help you figure out how many meetings you have to get to your goal, and it's connected to how much, both how much money you need to raise and the giving capacity of your network, of your donor pool. So now let's look at staffing for a few minutes. One of the huge bottlenecks about in this, and I'm sorry, it looks like at the bottom of the slide we've got previous training we did a few weeks ago is somehow mashed up in there. One of the big bottlenecks that we find happens in campaigns is that there's just not enough people power to get this thing done. And that's true even if you bring in a consulting team, and even if that consulting team offers you some on-site staffing. It's real, you just got to make sure you've got enough people power, because if you have a great story for your future and a great prospect pool, the only thing getting in your way is the systems and the staffing to do it. You need staff for both of the staffing your systems and staffing your soliciting. And again, I'm not going to read through this now. You'll see it in the slides, but these are some of the questions that we ask people and help them figure out on their staffing. If you think you're going to run your campaign completely on volunteers and board members, you still need somebody who's going to spend a lot of time organizing everybody. Otherwise, you're going to have a chaotic mess, I think. So just to get into our final element here, now that you've hopefully have a sense of the parameters of a campaign and the elements that will lead you to success, I wanted to talk for a few minutes about timing, because this is something that when you do a feasibility or planning study or otherwise set up your campaign, this is one of the things that it's very valuable to figure out. There's a number of aspects of timing. So here are some of the factors you need to consider regarding timing. What are your renovation needs? Is there a property you need to purchase? We met with a potential nonprofit client last week here in New York City, and there's a property they've identified that's very attractive, but they're not yet sure if they're going to be able to raise the money they need for a campaign. So it's a precarious thing. You have to figure out which goes first. When do I pull the trigger on buying that property? Are there urgent program needs? Organization that I've worked with for years actually is, if they don't raise a certain amount of money, they're in jeopardy of closing. Is that an opportunity for a campaign or some other kind of emergency funding? So these are things you need to think about regarding when the campaign is, when you're going to start it and how long it might take and the things that are going to be included. The other things some of the other things you need to think about are here. Before you launch the campaign, which is really the fundraising, are you doing pre-campaign planning? Are you going to be doing a feasibility study? How long after the study do I actually start the fundraising? Maybe sometimes the fundraising starts during or before a feasibility study. There's campaigns I've been involved with where a few people give millions of dollars before the campaign is even officially started. Of course, it's really important to figure out how long the campaign will take and how you differentiate between a quiet and a public phase. Just in brief, public phase is really when you're more vocal about it. Quiet is usually, in my view at least, it's not a secret. It's just you're kind of talking to your inner circle. And the public phase might be when you're doing much more visible fundraising. You're sending out emails, maybe even a crowdfunding website. You're maybe putting stuff in your local papers, things like that. So I also wanted to show you a few timelines that we've used with our clients. They're quite different looking from each other, but here's one where and again, you'll get this in the slide so you can look in detail, but it shows what's happening throughout each year. The campaign, we're crossing our fingers, will end at the end of 2019. This is a $18 million campaign. We have about 5 to go, so we're doing pretty good. But different things happen at different times, so that's all mapped out here. Here's one that's a little more rudimentary, but the thing that's interesting about this one is that you'll see that it's divided in a different way between income and expenses, and the expenses outline when, in very general terms, when the building project money will actually be needed, and so you can map the income from fundraising against that. And this one shows the different stages of a campaign, from lead gifts, major gifts, supporting gifts, and then matching, and when they're going to be doing donor recognition, and what these guys are calling parlor meetings, which are small cultivation parties to engage people, when each of those things are going to be happening, and sort of how much each month. This is a big bird's eye view of that, and at the bottom is very basic revenue projections as well. So we've come to the end of our 6 elements. I'm now going to spend a few minutes talking about the feasibility or planning study, and then we'll have a last little series of questions. And of course, anybody who wants to contact me with additional questions or is considering a campaign and needs some help from my team, we're more than happy to talk to you and see if we can be helpful, either in an initial phone call, or if you need our services in some shape or form. So, a feasibility study. There's a number of reasons that you want to do a feasibility study. It's just like I said at the beginning, a campaign is something that requires careful planning. You need to figure out ways to plan this thing that you're not going to get stuck with a project that won't get funded, and if so, you don't begin when you think you're going to begin, or you figure out another way to go about it so you don't get stuck. So these are a number of reasons to do the study, and I'm just going to go on to the next slide. In my view, of the 6 elements we looked at, these are the 4 that you need to know what is going on with before you can do a feasibility study. So a lot of times when we start working with nonprofits, these are the things we put in place. Sometimes it's a month, frankly, sometimes it's 6 months or more before we actually do a study. And the study is really, this is kind of the first part of the study. And then after that, we're actually spending time interviewing face-to-face members of the community. So let me show you. Here we have some of the outcomes of a study. So we will occasionally, we've interviewed like 12 to 15 people, and most of the time we interview 45 or so. Sometimes I know Jay's been involved in studies where they interview significantly more than that. So that's the general range. You want to interview people who are at the top of your potential donor list. So a lot of reasons for that. Any person on the street who's walking down Main Street of your community will have an opinion about your project, even if they've never thought about it before until that moment. That person is not going to help you get to a financial goal. That'll help you learn some information from that particular person. You're going to get a lot of information on what hopefully is a draft of your case and not the final version. And then you'll also get information on these other factors. And we do the study anywhere from 3 to 6 months, depending on how quickly an organization gets stuff in place. So Jay, with that, I'm going to conclude the sort of official portion of this webinar and see if there's a couple final questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Peter. And I don't know if you want to put your contact information up there yet so people can take that down as we're taking these last questions.
Sure. Well, let me just interrupt you for a second. This is my denouement or whatever, which is, what should you look for in a campaign consultant? And here he is. How about that? So it's amazing. So there is our website. You can access us through that, or you can email me directly at that email address. And I want to thank everybody again I see almost everybody stuck with us the entire time. I really appreciate that. It's great to present these materials. Love to get some feedback from you. And Jay, why don't we take a few questions?
Absolutely. So the first one, a couple of these came in during the last section as well as at the end. Ken had written, any advice on how many meetings or conversations are needed before delivering the actual ask for a major gift?
Yeah, so that's really interesting. I would say if you're in a campaign, we've discovered it's somewhat different than if you're just developing a major gift program. So if you're doing a major gift program, you can be a little bit more leisure about it. And we actually have a metric of, we like to say this phrase, 3 calls to a close, meaning you have an introductory meeting, and then the next meeting is you're actually making the ask, and the third meeting you're hopefully closing the gift. And for a campaign, we find that really you can get to that ask usually in the first meeting if there's some sort of relationship with the nonprofit already, and there's mitigating factors and that sort of thing.
Anastasia says, what is meant by a culture of philanthropy? You had that as that last item on that one slide. Does this refer to organization, community, or both?
I'm referring to the organization. My first answer is kind of like, I have no idea. Everybody says that all the time, and I put that on there, but that's not really true. The answer is that you want to bring fundraising and the campaign out from a corner of the organization where maybe one person is working on it and everybody else is looking at you sideways as if like, what is this thing? I know maybe we're going to have this building, but I don't know what's going on. So you want to find ways to explain to everybody on the staff and on the board how fundraising works, how campaigns work, and what their role in it can be, which doesn't mean that they have to actually go and solicit people for money. There's a lot of people who talk about that and have really good things to say. That's a quick answer.
Right. Carol Allen says, how reliable is the financial information ascertained during the feasibility interview?
Also a great question. So we don't tend to sneak around to people's, file cabinet where they have their financial statements. So we have to rely on our conversations, and we find that it's quite reliable. And what I mean by that is people are in general honest and open about how they want to participate in a campaign, and otherwise they probably wouldn't have agreed to an interview. And we find also that not most people, a lot of people will tell you the dollar amount that they're willing to contribute. And for the ones that don't, we make an educated guess based on a number of factors. And those who tell you, and Jay, it'd be really interesting some other time to know if you find this as well, but those who tell you, once the campaign gets rolling, that number usually goes up substantially because of the excitement about the future of the organization.
Right. Well, and there may be other opportunities for them to give. Sometimes these campaigns grow. So absolutely.
Yeah.
And then we have a question from Mary Lynn who says, is there a rule of thumb as to what % of the fundraising goal should be spent on fundraising expenses?
Yeah. Also a great question, and we'll make that the last one because we're almost at the hour.
Right.
We generally tell people it's between 5 and 10% of the goal, and that varies depending on how ready you are for a campaign and how big the goal is. If you've got, like just crazy big, if you have a $500 million campaign, you're not going to be spending $50 million on fundraising costs. You're probably not going to be spending 5%, which would be 25 million either. But so that's a general figure you can think of. Right.
Well, Peter, I know that we could go on, and I'm sure other people have questions, but I know we are reaching the hour, and I want to thank you so much, not only for such great information, but also providing it so clearly And I want to remind everybody that you had said that there's a place on your website where people can turn for a lot of these forms that really bring organization to this madness. So where again will people find those?
Right. So that's it's on the upper right-hand corner of the website. There's a little button that says Free Tools. Also on the homepage is a video with me sort of explaining fundraising, not campaign so much, and another button where you can inquire to get some help from us. And the free tools are not specifically for campaigns, but they cover pretty much everything we talked about today.
And those will be great resources as well as everything else there. Plus, you have Peter's email address right in front of you. So I urge you to take it down, go visit his site. And once again, these slides will be coming to you directly from DonorSearch. So be on the lookout for those in your email. And if you have a colleague who would benefit from hearing some of this, especially as you are planning these efforts in the future and need to bring that discipline to your thought process, this recording will be posted once again at donorsearch.net under the resources tab, and you can find it there and share that with your colleagues. So once again, our great thanks to Peter for coming and sharing some of this. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Jay. This was fun, and I hope everybody got a lot out of it.
Well, I know they did, and hopefully we can have you back on another occasion. I have questions to ask you myself, but we'll wait for another day for those. And for everybody who's here with us still, remember that tomorrow at 3, we have Jennifer Harris and Rachel Mastone, who will give a talk on awakening the authentic ask, which it better be awake by the time you finish this process, because it'll be important to have done all this stuff before you go out there and authentically ask people. But that'll be a terrific compliment to what we've been listening to today. So in addition to thanking Peter, of course, we always want to give our thanks to DonorSearch, who provides this platform. You can learn more about DonorSearch, the friend of everybody in the research community and everybody in the capital campaign, at donorsearch.net. Of course, our producer is the ever vigilant and valiant Hannah Krobach, silently in the background, making sure that everything goes according to plan. This is Jay Frost, and I want to thank you for being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
So long, everybody.